And let's talk about the classification of Chinese dialects. It's made on the basis of both diachronic and synchronic criteria. That means to both consider the history, historical change, and status quo. And diachronic features denote the historical changes in the phonological system since the time of the Middle Chinese, which is regarded as the common ancestor of most dialects of China. And for the synchronic aspect, difference between modern dialects as well as their special features are considered. So here's a map and a list of the major 10 dialects in China with their percentage of the population of speakers. And also we can notice the geographical distribution of them. And let's talk about three criteria of the basis of the classification, respectively include the phonological, vocabulary, and grammar. So first, for the phonological characteristics of a Chinese syllable, we need to consider the initials first. Considering the historical evolution, so the evolution of Middle Chinese 全浊 initials, such as 并, 定, 从, 群, those initials disappeared in some dialects. For example, in Mandarin, they changed into two groups at least, including the aspirated and unaspirated voiceless consonant. In other words, voiced b here changed into p, t, k, or b, d, g, voiceless, unaspirated. So they split, for example. For example, pi, tu, qu, they are pronounced aspirated consonant, while bu, du, ju, they pronounced unaspirated. The differentiation here majorly because of the tones, the difference of tones of the consonant. Well, the second criteria includes the differentiation or merging of two consonants, include f and he. Sometimes we say 复合部分 or 复合区分. Like in some dialects, Fujian is pronounced like a Hujian. Hunan is sometimes pronounced as a Fulan. This can be regarded as the criteria or features to distinguish different dialects. The third consideration is the differentiation or merging of 呢 部分 or not. You can compare your dialects, the pronunciation of Helan and Henan. If they are similar, that means in your dialects, these two consonants, nasal consonant n and literal consonant l, they merged. Another case is a 牛奶 or so, 牛奶. And modern constituent of Middle Chinese 支彻成, 3 consonants, 3 initials, considering their pronunciation. Originally, in some dialects, they pronounced like a 的, 特, 的, 支彻成, even though they pronounce 支吃 in some other, even the majority of the dialects, including Mandarin. Okay, here's a chart that we have already discussed before. You can refer it for the information of the pronunciation of different consonants in Middle Chinese. And you can also compare that with the IPA chart, consonant parts. Further information can be referred in chapter 2 and 3. Okay, here's a information of chart showing the development of the Middle Chinese 全浊 initials. 全浊 initials is shown here. 全浊means this group. They are voiced consonants that used as the initial in Middle Chinese and in some dialects in contemporary Chinese. So most of the Mandarin has no 全浊 initial nowadays. So you can compare the pronunciation of this group of consonants in different dialects. For example, in 吴语吴方言, okay, all the 全浊 initials usually still voiced should be pronounced as the way of Middle Chinese. Remain the old feature. While in Huiyu, they're all voiceless. In many dialects, locality also separated. This is the general rules to distinguish Huiyu from other dialects. Similarly, you can refer to other information here in this page. Okay, the fifth criteria is the palatalization of Middle Chinese velar initials. To be specific is the pronunciation of a group of 间期群小狭 consonants. They were traditionally read or pronounced as 咯科呵 or similar sounds, while some of them are pronounced as 机器西, like in Mandarin. For example, originally in Middle Chinese, 解, 谦, 香 would be pronounced as something like a 给, kin, hyung. While you can compare this criteria to the sixth one, it is similar. It is about palatalization of Middle Chinese alveolar initial. 自思思, the group of 自思思, traditionally they are called 经清从心写. So 自思思 group, in history, some of the consonants would be pronounced as 自思思, while today 机器西. They merged with this group. So the group of 间期群小狭 and 经清从心写, they merged with each other. For example, you pronounce these groups similarly. 解, 谦, 香, 解, 谦, 香. They pronounce the same, almost the same nowadays in Mandarin and some other dialects, while they are different. They were different in history. For example, 解 here in history should be pronounced as 解, or 谦 as a 谦, or 香 as 心. And also number 7 here is about the denasalization of Middle Chinese nasal initials. Particularly refers to the group of 姨母 here. 姨母字. In history, the consonants, the initials of 姨母字 would be n, a velar nasal. While nowadays, most of them in most dialects lost their initial at all. For example, in Mandarin Chinese, 吴, wei, yi, they have no initial, consonant initial at all. While in history, they should be pronounced as a ngo, ngui, ni, or something like this. And also, another criterion is the presence or absence of the voiced affricates or fricatives. Voiced For example, the pronunciation of including 凤从鞋床上, those consonants. Also this group, 全浊 group. And for example, the old pronunciation of 凤 would be boom or so, something like this. Boom. Okay, yes, this is the first page of 韵境, shows the division and classification of syllables of Middle Chinese. While it can also be used to study the differentiation or merging of medials, contemporary Chinese. For example, we all know for contemporary Chinese, there are 4 kinds of 呼, 四呼, considering the situation of medials, including those without medial, 开口呼, and with the medial of 一, 乌, and yu, respectively, referred as 合口呼, 起始呼, 撮口呼. While in history, the situation is more complex because you need to also consider 等 and 呼 simultaneously. Who is shown on this page as this character, 开. So 内转第一开 means the first page of the 开口呼. 开口呼 usually refers to the syllables without the medial of 乌 or yu nowadays. And the 等 is the grade. Here we have 4 grades respectively of each syllable. Here's a chart which is clearer, showing the situation and distribution of the 开口, 合口 and 等 grades of syllables according to their difference of the initials. That means different initials, different group of initials. For example, 帮旁并名 or 端头定拟, they can be used with different kinds of grades and different kinds of 开口 or 合口, 呼, respectively. It shows the general tendency of the matching rules. And for different dialects, they have different principles or tendencies of the matching. This can also be used as a consideration for the study of medials to classify different dialects. Okay, let's talk about the finals, 韵母. And first, you need to consider the monophonization and diphthongization of vowels. For example, the same finals in Middle Chinese can be read as a monophthong or a diphthong in different situations. And this can be regarded as a criteria to classify dialects. For example, even in Mandarin 普通话, here this character in Middle Chinese should be pronounced as ta, but nowadays it's pronounced as a tuo. Well, this dia, 者, now it's pronounced as 者. So it depends on situation. And you need to consider the contemporary pronunciation of different dialects. And also, you should consider the length of vowels and the evolution of Middle Chinese plosive codas, which is a very important 入声, so-called 入声 plosive coda. For example, there are 3 kinds of plosive coda in Middle Chinese, including particular or there are 3 and 3 codas of the syllable. I'll give you some examples. For example, in Middle Chinese, 甲 should be pronounced as a gap, gap. E like a yit, yit, end with a t, and liu like a look, look, end with the k. But without plosive without explosion of the airstream. While in some dialects, it remains, the situation of Middle Chinese remains. While in some other dialects, they merged into a uvula plosive. And in some other situation, it disappeared, like in Mandarin. And the first consideration of finals is the evolution of Middle Chinese nasal codas. You know, in Middle Chinese, there are at least 3 nasal codas, like they can all be used as the ending of a final, like the situation of xin, and xing here. These 2 xin pronounced the same in Mandarin Chinese nowadays, xin, no difference. While in Middle Chinese and even in some other dialects, for example, Cantonese nowadays, this xin should be end with a should be pronounced as a sim. Here is a sin, and here is a sing. They are different. They were different and still are different in some dialects. Okay, lastly, we need to consider tones and consider the differentiation or merging and a number of tonal categories. We know in standard Chinese, there are 4 categories or tones, while in some other, especially southern dialects, there are more. And also we need to consider the evolution of the Middle Chinese interrent tone, another translation of the plosive codas. Here we emphasize the kind of tones, so translated into interrent tone of 入声. And here this chart shows the differentiation of 4 tones in Middle Chinese 平赏去入 and the contemporary situation. For example, for most of the Mandarin, Northern Chinese dialect, 平声 is divided into 2 groups, 阴平 and 阳平. And for most of the Mandarin, 入声 disappear. This is the general principle of Mandarin. While for other southern dialects, you can also consider the situation of them. Some of them remain 入声, and some of them even divide 入声 into further classifications. And 阴平 and 阳平 are typically divided, while some other dialects even differentiate 阴去 and 阳去. So this makes the more complex situation of the tones of southern Chinese dialects. Okay, here this page shows the situation of the development of Middle Chinese syllables in 入声 in Mandarin Chinese dialects, 北方话. You can notice here shows the different regions of different sub-dialect of Mandarin. Southwest, Central Plain, 中原官话, 冀鲁官话, 兰银官话, 北京, 交辽, and 江淮. Okay, so for 江淮官话, which is a simple, because they remain 入声, still pronounced with the entering tongue. While for Beijing dialect, it is comparatively more complex because it divides the entering tone into different situations according to the consonant, according to the initial 清音, because you need to consider the initial 清音, 次浊 or 全浊. 清音, 次浊 or 全浊, the situation of the consonant of the syllable determines the change of the 入声. For example, for 清音 syllable in Beijing dialect, it's very complex because it has different situations of 阴阳赏去. Sometimes can be randomly classified. We have no general tendency can be summarized. While for 次浊 consonant, almost all of them of the 入声 read as a 去声. For 全浊 阳平. This is similar for some other subdialect. For example, 交辽 or 兰银, they are similar for the situation of 次浊and 全浊 with Beijing dialect, while for others, there are some different tendencies. For example, it is very simple, okay, of the Southwest Mandarin, 西南官话, okay, they changed all the 入声, all the entering tones into 阳平, which is simple. Okay, here's the general tendency and the general principle, and also the criteria we can make use of to classify different dialects. Okay, here's the map shows the dialects, major dialects of Chinese language and the major subdialects of Mandarin. You can notice the geographical distribution of them on this map. Here's a map showing the southern dialects, including Wu, Hui, and the Gan, Xiang, Min, 客家, Yue, and Pinghua. Okay, and here is the map showing the distribution of Wu dialect, including their subdialects distribution. And here's the major feature of phonetic of Wu dialect. Let's talk about them. So Wu dialects has the voiced initials, remain the voiced initials as the situation of Middle Chinese. They remain the pronunciation of b, d, g, v, z, things like this, and corresponding to Middle Chinese. And it has no codas like or ptk. That means the entering tone, 入声, disappear. And nasal coda of disappear. And it has more than 6 tonal categories, more complex than Mandarin. It has 2 kinds of falling tones. That means the falling tone, 入去声, falling tone of Wu Fangyan need to be distinguished further. For example, you can observe on this page 去声 Wu Fangyan, whether Suzhou, Wuxi, or Shanghai, they differentiate 去声 into 2 categories, which pronounce differently. Okay, this map shows the distribution of Hokkien, Fujianhua, or Min dialect. So here's the main phonetic features of a Min dialect, including the most level tone, 平声, where the voiced initial 平声全浊声母 have become unaspirated. And some was the initial 支彻成 have preserved the plosive sound, the very old pronunciation, plosive sound. That means 支吃诗 sometimes pronounced as de te, especially in southern Min dialect. It does not have the labor dental, fu or vu, no such consonant in Min Fangyan, while sometimes they pronounce it as a b, bang pang bing ming, okay, bang pang bing, pronounced like bang pang bing instead of fei fu feng. And sometimes the fu can be merged with a he, fu he 部分, like in Fujian. And it has the coda of and ptk, remains the entering tone. And it has more than 7 tonal categories, and not all of them correspond to the tone of Middle Chinese. That means the tonal system of their changed is more complex than most of other Chinese dialects, and it cannot attribute to the ancestor of Middle Chinese, because as we have discussed, Min, the dialect Min, there's a hypothesis of the origin of the Min, the separation of Min dialect, which regards it as separated earlier than Middle Chinese, separate earlier. Oh, here's the map showing the Cantonese, 粤方言. Okay, here is its major phonetic features, such as it does not have the voiced initials, which is different from Wu 方言. And it has the coda, and 不的个, similar to Min 方言. And it has more than 7 tonal categories, in general correspond to ones of Middle Chinese, which is different from Min 方言. Oh, here's the map showing the distribution of Hakka, 客家. And major phonetic features of Hakka includes it does not have the voiced initial, and the Middle Chinese voiced initial 全浊声母 are now all pronounced as aspirated. And the finals are generally similar to Mandarin group, which is a very interesting, except the situation that it has the coda of and 不的个, remains the entering tones similar to Min and Yue. And it does not have 缩口呼, there's no yu, medial yu. While 上声and 去声 only have one category each, while 平声and 入声 both have 2. The tonal differentiation is different from Min or Yue dialect. Okay, besides the phonological characteristics, we also have some lexical and grammatical characteristics that can be considered as the criteria to differentiate dialects, but they are not major parts, major considerations. Let's talk about them a little bit. There are some specific dialectal words, which is to some extent important factor for the classification of dialects. For example, 格旧. 格旧 is a term used in Jin dialect. And 折咧, from my mother tongue, Tianjin dialects, means to intentionally look for some trouble, 折咧. And 标子, in 交流 Mandarin, means stupid. Gala is the different pronunciation of 角落, and 菜猪 means 豚鼠. 困觉 is the expression of Wu or Gan dialect. 时茶 CD is the expression of Chaoshan or Hokkien dialect. In Cantonese, it says 饮茶. And 梁子娘, I don't know how to pronounce that in Hakka, but literally written this way, 梁子娘. And 阿婆, 阿公, they are used respectively in Wu and Min 方言. Okay, here are some examples. You can find more if you own have a dialect. Okay, lastly, we mentioned a little bit of the grammatical differences. And the 3 aspects need to be considered. First is the morphological changes, the change of the form of a word. For example, here in Shandong Haiyang, it says 小儿科, 小儿科. Er here added following 下, following the verb. And next, the use of functional words. For example, 江苏扬州没得关系得 here. Function following the negation. And some sentence patterns. For example, in Beijing dialect, we sometimes say 吃了吗您, the reversion of the subject and the verb. And also the repetition, the duplication of, for example, in Wu 方言, 信寄寄就来, I'll come here after I send the message. And here is another example from Cantonese. 我俾咗本書佢, 我俾咗本書佢 literally means 我给了他一本书. 俾 means 给, and 咗 is 了, 佢 corresponding with 他. 本书一本书. Say the order of different parts in Cantonese can be different from Mandarin. Okay, here is the major contents of this chapter. And here is the end of this course. I'm very thankful for your attention to my course. Probably in the future, I'll provide more courses for you. I'm looking forward to meet you in the future. Thank you. This course is sponsored by the Guangdong Higher Education RMS Promotion Plan, Beijing Normal University, Hong Kong Baptist University, United International College, F1 teaching-related project. Hereby, I express my sincere appreciation for the sponsors, and it is produced by Tianjin Hengyisi Education Information Consulting Company. I'm very thankful. Thanks.